Imagine walking through a forest late at night when you notice something strange on the ground. A perfect circle of mushrooms has appeared between the trees. The grass inside the circle looks different. The air feels strangely quiet. There are no footprints leading toward it, but something about the circle makes you feel as though you are being watched. You step closer, then you hear music. It sounds distant at first, almost like somebody playing a violin somewhere deep in the forest. You look around, there's nobody there. The music gets louder, and then you notice the footprints around the mushrooms. They are very tiny. And you remember the old warning: never step inside a Fae circle. In modern fantasy, the Fae are often portrayed as beautiful magical creatures with wings, glowing eyes, and supernatural powers. But traditional European folklore paints a much stranger picture. The Fae, sometimes called the fair folk, fairies, good people, depending on the tradition and context, are not simply cute magical creatures. They belong to a vast collection of folklore surrounding supernatural beings who were believed to exist alongside humans. They could be beautiful or frightening, generous or cruel, playful or dangerous, and perhaps the most unsettling thing about them was that they did not necessarily follow human morality. What humans considered good or bad might not matter to them at all. The Fae had their own rules, their own world, their own understanding of time, promises, hospitality, and ownership. And according to folklore, humans who ignored those rules would pay a terrible price. One of the most famous signs of the Fae world is the Fae Circle, most commonly known as a fairy ring. In nature, fairy rings are circular patterns of mushrooms that occur because of fungal growth underground. Today, science can explain how they form, but for centuries, people saw these strange circles appearing naturally in fields and forests and wondered how such perfect shapes could exist. Folklore offered an explanation. Fairies had been dancing there. The circle was the place where supernatural beings gathered at night. The mushrooms were the evidence, and once that belief became established, the circle itself became something humans were supposed to avoid. Imagine finding a perfect ring of mushrooms in a field. You walk around it, there are no mushrooms outside the circle. They are arranged almost perfectly. You wonder what would happen if you stepped inside. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just grass and mushrooms. But folklore tells you otherwise. According to some stories, stepping into a fairy ring could make you disappear from the human world. You could be transported into the Fae realm. You could be forced to dance. You could lose a track of time, or you could return home and discover that everybody you knew had grown old while you remained exactly the same. The idea of distorted time is one of the most persistent themes in Fae folklore. A person could enter the supernatural world believing they had been gone for a few minutes or hours, only to discover that days, years, or even centuries had passed in the human world. This is sometimes called fairy time. The concept appears in various European stories and has made the Fae especially frightening. Imagine entering a circle at sunset. You hear music, you see people dancing. They invite you to join them. You dance for what feels like an hour. Then you become tired and decide to leave. You step outside the circle. The forest is completely different. The trees are larger. The path is gone. You return to your village. Nobody recognizes you. You find your old home, but another family lives there. You discover a grave with your own name carved onto it. The date says you died 200 years ago. According to the story, only an hour passed for you, but the human world moved on without you. This idea isn't unique to one culture, but it became deeply connected with the stories of the fairy realm in Ireland, Scotland, and other parts of the British Isles. In Irish folklore, the Aos Sí are supernatural beings associated with mounds, hills, and ancient places. The term is often translated loosely as people of the mounds or people of the fairy hills. Their relationship with the landscape is extremely important. Ancient earthworks, burial mounds, and certain natural locations could be considered places associated with the supernatural. This is why disturbing a fairy mound was traditionally treated with caution. A person might be afraid to remove stones, cut down trees, or build on certain sites because they believe the Fae occupied them. One particularly famous tradition involves fairy trees, especially isolated hawthorn trees in Irish folklore. Certain trees were believed to be associated with the fairy world. Destroying one could supposedly bring bad luck or supernatural consequences. These beliefs weren't simply stories told for entertainment, they could influence real decisions about land and construction. There are stories of roads being redirected around fairy trees rather than cutting them down. Whether someone genuinely believed fairies would attack or simply respected the tradition, the result was the same. The tree remained standing. This shows how folklore can shape the physical landscape. The Fae aren't just characters in stories, their presence became attached to actual places, but the Fae were not always described as tiny creatures. This is one of the biggest differences between traditional folklore and modern fantasy. The modern fairy is usually miniature. Traditional supernatural beings associated with the Fae could be human-sized or even larger. They could appear beautiful, ordinary, or completely otherworldly. Some stories describe them as warriors, queens, hunters, musicians, or mysterious strangers. Their supernatural nature was way more important than their physical size. The image of tiny winged fairies became especially popular much later through literature, illustration, and popular culture. In older folklore, wings were not always part of the story. The Fae were often much more mysterious than that. And then there is the issue of names. In many traditions, people avoided insulting the Fae or speaking about them disrespectfully. They might call them the good people, the fair folk, or another respectful name. This was not necessarily because they were considered benevolent. In fact, the politeness could be a form of protection. If you believe supernatural beings can hear you, why would you insult them? It was safer to remain respectful. Imagine standing outside a fairy mound and shouting, "There are no fairies here." According to folklore, that might be exactly the kind of arrogance that attracts their attention. The Fae are often portrayed as extremely sensitive to disrespect. You do not insult them. You don't steal from them. You don't enter their territory without permission. And most importantly, you don't assume that because they look beautiful, they are harmless. The Fae are often associated with bargains and promises. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of their folklore. A Fae creature may offer a person exactly what they want: wealth, beauty, knowledge, love, or protection. But there is often a hidden price. The human agrees to something without understanding the consequences, and because the Fae are supernatural beings, they may interpret the agreement literally. If you say, "I'll give you anything," they might take you seriously. If you promise never to refuse them, you may discover that you have trapped yourself. This creates the famous idea of the fairy bargain. In modern fantasy, this concept has become incredibly popular, but its roots come from older stories in which supernatural beings interact with humans through promises, gifts, and obligations. The Fae don't necessarily need to physically attack you, they can simply make you agree to your own downfall. Another dangerous element is food. In many fairy stories, humans are warned not to eat food offered by supernatural beings. The reason varies depending on the story, but the basic idea is that accepting Fae food can bind you to their world. Once you eat, you may become unable to leave. Imagine being lost in a forest, you're starving. You suddenly discover a beautiful table covered with bread, fruits, and cakes. A group of strangers invite you to eat. They look friendly, they tell you that you're safe. You take one bite, and everyone becomes silent. One of them smiles. "Now you can stay." You look behind you, but there is no path. The food wasn't hospitality, it was a contract. The idea reflects a broader theme in folklore. Hospitality can be dangerous when the host is not human. Another major part of Fae folklore is music and dancing. Fairy rings were believed to be places where supernatural beings danced at night. Someone walking through a field might hear music coming from a circle of mushrooms. If they followed it, they might see the Fae dancing, but watching them wasn't necessarily safe. Some stories warn that humans who join the dance could become trapped. They would dance until they collapsed, while time passed differently outside the circle. The music could become irresistible. The person might know they should leave but feel unable to stop. This creates a terrifying idea. What if the Fae don't have to force you into their world? What if they simply make you want to stay? The circle becomes a trap disguised as beauty, and that is one of the recurring themes in Fae folklore: temptation. The Fae world is beautiful enough that humans may willingly enter it. A mysterious song, a beautiful stranger, a table full of food, a promise of wealth, a doorway hidden inside a tree. The danger isn't always obvious. Sometimes the thing that attracts you is the thing that traps you. Fae folklore also contains stories of changelings, where a human child is supposedly replaced by a supernatural substitute. This was historically connected to unexplained illness, developmental differences, and other situations that communities did not understand. Today, changeling beliefs are recognized as folklore and are also studied critically because these ideas sometimes cause real harm to vulnerable people. But within the mythology, the story is terrifying. The person you love may look exactly the same, but somehow you believe they are no longer themselves. The Fae have taken the real person and left something else behind. This is another example of the Fae being associated with boundaries between human and supernatural, familiar and unfamiliar, life and death. There are also stories of adults being taken into fairy world. This is sometimes called being taken by the fairies. A person might disappear for days or years and return with strange memories. In some stories, they claim to have been living with the Fae. In others, they return physically unchanged while everybody around them has aged. These stories can be interpreted in many ways. Historically, they may have helped explain disappearances or unusual events. Psychologically, they can represent the fear of losing somebody without understanding why. But within the folklore, the explanation is simple: the Fae took them, and once they have you, getting back may be almost impossible. The idea of fairy circles also connects to the natural phenomena beyond mushrooms. Certain circles of stones, unusual formations, and ancient archaeological sites have been interpreted through folklore as supernatural locations. Ancient burial mounds became associated with fairy hills, mysterious lights became fairy lights, strange sounds became fairy music, nature became a map of supernatural activity. This is part of what makes the Fae folklore so immersive. The Fae don't live in a completely separate fantasy kingdom. They supposedly live right beside us. You just have to know where to look. A hill, a tree, a cave, a field, a ring of mushrooms, a quiet forest, a place where the air feels different. According to the stories, these could all be entrances to another world, and this idea continues today. Online communities have created modern stories about people claiming to encounter Fae circles, strange creatures, and mysterious lights. Some people genuinely believe in modern Fae encounters, others treat them as storytelling, spiritual belief, or fantasy. There is no scientific evidence demonstrating that supernatural Fae beings exist or that fairy rings are portals to another dimension. Fairy rings have well understood biological explanations involving fungal growth, but folklore surrounding them remains fascinating because it shows how humans interpreted mysterious patterns in nature before modern science proved explanations. One of the most important things to understand about the Fae is that they aren't necessarily good or evil. They are often portrayed as other. Their morality isn't human morality. A Fae may help you today and punish you tomorrow. It may give you gold, but it might take something more valuable in return. It may invite you to dinner and then refuse to let you leave. It may save your life because it wants something from you later. This makes the Fae unpredictable, and unpredictability is often scarier than pure evil. If a monster is evil, you know what it wants. You know to run. But what if the creature is charming? What if it smiles? What if it offers you exactly what you've always wanted? What if the only warning sign is that something feels slightly wrong? That is where Fae stories become psychological horror. The danger is hidden behind beauty, and perhaps that is. But modern fantasy often makes the Fae more glamorous than traditional folklore did. The older stories could be much stranger and much darker. A fairy wasn't necessarily a tiny woman with wings. It could be something ancient wearing a human face. It could be something living beneath a hill. It could be something that didn't understand human emotions. It could be a being that considered humans temporary and insignificant. If you accidentally offend it, there might be no apology that could save you. So, what happens if you really find a Fae circle? Scientifically, probably nothing supernatural. You might have discovered a naturally occurring fungal ring, but folklore tells you something different. Don't step inside it, don't disturb it, don't eat anything you find there. Don't follow mysterious music, don't accept gifts, don't make promises. And if you hear someone calling your name from inside the forest, don't answer. Imagine you're walking through the woods at midnight, you see mushrooms first, a perfect circle, you stop. There is no wind, no birds, no insects, everything is silent. Then you hear music, softly at first, a melody you have never heard before. You look into the circle, there are tiny lights floating above the grass. Then you see figures dancing between the trees. They look almost human, almost. One of them notices you. It stops dancing. The others stop too. Hundreds of eyes turn towards you. The music stops. One figure walks towards the edge of the circle. It smiles. Come in, it says. You take one step backward. It smiles wider. Don't worry, you won't be gone for long. You ask what it means. The figure points towards the sky. The moon has disappeared. Only a few minutes, it says. At least for you. You run, you don't look back, you reach the road. Your phone suddenly turns on. You check the dates, your hands begin shaking. The date is exactly the same. Only one thing has changed. Your reflection in the phone screen is not yours. It's the face of someone standing behind you. You turn around, nobody is there. You hear the music again. This time it's coming from inside your own house. And somewhere in the darkness, something whispers, "You left the circle too early." Okay, honestly, this was extremely scary to read. I had like goosebumps all over my body when I was like reading it and talking about it. But I really, really like this story. Like, I absolutely love it. Are fairies real? Are they not? Let me know down in the comment section below what you think. If you like me and if you like my content, make sure that you subscribe and you like this video. I love you guys so much. Bye bye.